Greetings, everyone. Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to the debut of a brand new show here on the channel. This is called Live Album Love, and my co-captain going forward will be Mr. Rick Bonte. What's happening, Rick?
A lot, my friend, but life is good. Never a dull moment. How about you?
Doing good. It's a little cloudy here in the Hudson Valley. I think we're going to get some thunderstorms later today, and it's going to be a little on the warm side, but I think tomorrow it's going to be pleasant and beautiful. I got a bunch of my college buddies coming over tomorrow for a little grilling and chilling. I haven't seen them all together in probably since before the pandemic, so looking forward to that. How about you?
Well, the weather's been fickle all week. Like we had some sunshine and thunderstorm and all that. Had a great day when I went and saw Dead Daisy on Monday, but today I see Dio Caesar Windsor in town, and right now in the morning it's sunshine, and they're talking about 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. That's like 77 to 80 Fahrenheit, and as temperature goes. So yeah, it looks like a good day, but I don't know how long it holds up. It's like every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the weather changing.
I know, and I think next week it's supposed to be in the 90s here. I'm like, ugh, I'm not quite ready.
Yeah, I'm not into that. I like it where you can wear shorts and pants and feel comfortable. I hate it when you have no other choice but to go down to nothing. So it's so hot out there. And it's only, the summer just started. So
just started. Yeah, exactly. So this show called Live Album Love. So we've done a lot of content on Sea of Tranquility over the years dedicated to live albums, and everybody loves live albums. I love live albums. So Rick came to me a couple of weeks ago and he's like, hey, why don't we look to like just make it like a regular thing? Because Rick loves live albums just as much as I do. So I said, yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool because it's like every like twice a year, I always like, oh, I want to do a little mini series on live albums. And you do it and then you forget about it and then you come back to it. So to do something like on a fairly regular basis, I think is pretty cool. And we're actually debuting it this morning here in the Friday morning of the Funhouse time slot because Martin's on vacation this week. And I knew I wanted to put some, generally when Martin's away, I want to put something in this time slot because everybody looks forward to SOT programming, me and Martin on Fridays. So Rick is like, hey, since Martin's not going to be around and you probably need something to plug in, why don't we debut Live Album Love? And I was like, that's a really cool idea. And the first band you've seen the thumbnail, you see me with the shirt, you know what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Allman Brothers band. And before we get into the Allmans, I want to give everybody just a little kind of preview of what's in store for this show. This is all going to be, each episode will be about one specific band or artist and more talking about the surplus of live material that's available for these bands that goes above and beyond maybe that classic live album that everybody knows. And we'll talk about that classic live album for each of these bands, but the whole purpose of this is to kind of prompt folks to investigate the live catalog a little bit deeper because there's a lot of good live albums. Some of these bands have a shit ton of live albums. We may not have them all. In fact, probably in most cases, we won't have them all, but we do have a lot. So, and we're going to be talking about them. We'll be highlighting the ones that are really noteworthy. We're not necessarily going to rank them, right? But we'll definitely give you some feedback on which ones you should go next after you have already heard the classic, right? And so that's what we're going to do. And there might be some episodes where, Rick's got a bunch of live albums from that band or artist and I don't, and vice versa, but that's okay. I think it's more important that we highlight these bands that have a surplus of live material for those of you who like listening to live albums. So with all that being said, Rick, why don't you talk a little bit about why the Fillmore is noted for being one of the great live albums of all time, not even, never mind just being a great Allman Brothers live album. So this was 1971, right? Early on in the band's catalog.
Between two nights, and they put their double album together, and you can get an additional version with some extra live stuff. What was like 71 concert later on, just adding into it because they can with the CD being longer.
Sure.
But this was my great way. I don't, me, I'm more of a CD guy, but this is how old this record is to me. As a teenager, I got it. We had a rock station in Detroit radio coming over to Windsor, and we hear a lot of Allman Brothers, and especially the live version, because everybody like you and I agree that some of these versions are the definitive version of those songs.
Sure.
And what mentioning about these live bands that we're going to talk about through these shows, it's not only because it's great to have a snapshot musically of where they are at that time period and how they evolve. But their music live is almost like new material, even though you might have the studio album. They they usually expand the material, and there's a lot of improvisation, and there's a lot of what happening that night is going to be different the next night in terms how long the song may be. And just like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, a lot of bands of the 70s or so on, they do vamp, and it's interesting for us as listeners. Almost feels like we're listening to a brand new thing from the band, even though the recognizable song, but you know you're not getting the same thing. They don't necessarily play note to note to the record. They give a chance to expand, and that's what makes this a great live experience, because that night your ticket in the seat, you're seeing something that you're not going to guarantee see all the time. And what is significant about this live album, as you brought up, because it's the third album for one. How many people can do that? I know, Dynamite live album, very similar to Kiss Story, where they had the fourth record before they had a big bombastic live album. But with them, this is the third release, and taking a little bit of the greatest hits of what they had at that point. But it's like amazing, a brilliant songs are here that would never been issue to the world until people got that. And what was interesting about that is that they get the big band. They got what, 2 drummers, they got keyboard, a bass, and 2 guitar players to mic all that properly with no sound bleeding into the other mic. I mean, this is a great recording album.
Recording,
you hear the separation. I mean, it's harder when you have bands like Santana and there's so much percussions are bleeding into the microphones of the nearby instruments. And so you always get this live sound, but you can never get the separation like they did here. And going forward, Allman Brothers always put out a good sounding live album. It never sounds like, like a bootleg or a radio broadcast. It always sounds like it was a studio type of recording. No, it's in a live setting. Is so well isolated, the track, that they have complete control in the mix. And even when you see them remaster this stuff, it's not far different from the original copy. It's that good. So this was a winner right off the gate. And the Allman Brothers, basically whole career is to live up to this live experience. Everybody that want to go see them want a piece of this live performance going forward.
Yeah. You bring up some really good points. So this was their third album. The first 2 records, Allman Brothers Band and Ottawa South, which most people love and respect in their legendary albums, didn't really sell all that well. So I think the record label was kind of like, all right, we're taking a chance on you guys, and you're not really bringing in the money yet, so we need something big. And who would have thought that this live album would be that big album that would kind of shoot them to the moon? But they were actually already at the time a pretty big draw on the concert scene, which I think was, they're drawing people. How do we capture that? Because the albums maybe aren't quite capturing that fire and that intensity. And, I think it's hard. Rick and I are basically the same age. And it's hard, I think, for us today to imagine like the music scene back then, and especially the record buying scene. It's very different than it is today. So I think, this was right at the heart of, or the end of the psychedelic era. And I think that a lot of bands were taking more chances with their albums, what they were doing live. You said it perfectly. They branch out live on stage. The big, long improvisations, you have like these sprawling. You got like Whip and Post is almost 23 minutes long. You've got Mountain Jam is like 33 and change, right? So it's hard to harness that. When you're out on the road, what were they out on the road? 300 days. I've read so many Allman Brothers books. 300 days a year, they're out on the road touring, right? So how do you capture that, what you're doing on stage every night on a studio album? It's kind of hard, even though the studio albums are great. So I think this was like a perfect thing to do for a band that people were totally digging on stage, but maybe the albums weren't lighting up the charts. And all of a sudden, you now can buy a snapshot on an LP, a double LP of what maybe you hadn't seen live in concert, and experience it over and over again. I think one of the great things, you touch upon the big band thing. Yes, all these guys are amazing players. you've got two sensational guitar players, one who was getting all the notoriety at the time, one who probably didn't get it till a little bit later on after the other passed away, sadly, right?
Yeah,
You've got
Dicky.
the great singer, great organ player. You got the two amazing drummers, this great bass player, and playing this music that, for all intents and purposes, is basically psychedelic bluesy music, right? Psychedelic blues. It's really what it is. Later to be called Southern rock, right? Obviously, with their third studio album, well, fourth studio album is when they really started to sound like that Southern rock band that we came to associate with them.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Memory of Elizabeth Reed, and that's basically a fusion tune, right? I mean,
I mean, honestly, there was some moment there, just the way, like, okay, even though there's some improvisation here and some jamming and stretching it out, but the reality is it's so well fit. Like, you don't feel like it's a jam. There are bands that jam, you can tell they're jamming, and you can tell they're not really knowing what the next move is. But here, it felt like all these things are all there for a reason. It's like it belonged there. It's almost like sheet music. It was there because it had to be there. It's so well put together. And that's the thing about the Allman Brothers. You wouldn't know because everything sounds so cohesive and so right on spot on. And that's what I like. I mean, me and you love progressive rock. Why? Because there's a lot of memory and song changes. The song you just mentioned, that song has so many changes into it. And to me, that is a progressive Southern rock tune. That is a very smart, intelligent piece of music to put together. I mean, you don't even miss that there's no singing on it. Like, you get a band like song like Jessica. How beautiful is that? I mean, every structure of the piece of an element of the music. And to me, it's very progressive. It's not prog rock because that's not where they're aiming for. But honestly, they play like they are. Like, they're playing like they are, very well experienced musicians. They let it shine. But you know what? It's not, even though they're showing off, it's not about technical. It's feeling it, what the song needed. That's the balance that they do well, is that they're showing what good, great players they are, but it's the emotion and the melody that they're playing along. It's not just to play. It belonged there, It's like, it's hard to describe that, because it's like some people can show off and be fancy, and that's cool, and it's a little bit like doodling, but they would never do that. They would jam, but it felt like it was enhancing the song. It was for the song. They were respecting it, even though there was being a showboat at the same time. It wasn't coming off like that. It come off, man, can you feel it? We're all feeling it. And it's like their whole band has a telepathy, like they're reading each other's mind, and they're waiting for that one trigger moment to go to the next part. I mean, that's why when you hear Led Zeppelin, like song remains the same, they can do Dazed and Confused for 26 minutes. They would jam till they hear that one spot that Jimmy Page is at. Okay, here comes the next part. That's our trigger. That's what the Allman Brothers have. They'll jam. Okay, wait till we hear that one similar thing that he wants to do before we move to the next part. But at that time, you wouldn't know they're waiting for it, because it sounds like it all belongs there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so well crafted.
It's amazing too how you read interviews and things from famous guitar players who have come in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and how many of them, no matter what the genre is, cite this album as one of the greatest guitar albums of all time that they cut their teeth on to learn their craft, right? I mean, it's amazing how this album has stood the test of time. And this was recorded at a place in New York City, right, the Fillmore East, which is no longer there, but this was March 12th and 13th, 71. I mean, they went and played way into the night, and the set was so long that they couldn't fit it all on the album. So what did they do? They released this album, which was missing a good chunk of the concert. They included additional tracks on the Eat a Peach live, which was Eat a Peach album, which was half studio, half live. Yep. And then for the CD reissue here, they threw all those Eat a Peach tracks on here, which they always should have been on here. It should have been.
I agree
about it. And then they took a couple tracks from the June 27th, 1971 show, also at the Fillmore, and that was a One Way Out and Midnight Rider. And then, so really for me, this is the definitive version of this, because you basically have the whole original concert and songs that probably should have been in that original set thrown in as well. So,
Yeah, it's unique. It's just like the way we described the Who live at Leeds. They always should have a double album. Or we have a double album, but we said they could have a triple album. They could actually get away with it because they had that much material that night.
All right, so what we're going to do is because we could sit here and talk about the Fillmore like all night, but let's why don't we move into, so Rick and I both have a selection of stuff from 1970 and 71, and we want to talk about those first before we move into later periods. So Rick, you got a couple from this time period that we want to highlight, and we'll kind of go back and forth here.
What I'll do, because I know you got some individual, I'll do the box set right now, because when they had the box set, not only they put some songs from the earlier period before, and they like a greatest hit, but they put a lot of unreleased live material is why I grabbed it, because the curse is real when we come to collecting all these live material. It's hard. Like you said, we won't get all the Allman Brothers. It's just so much out there. But I like this because it gave you alternate versions of songs from the Fillmore live at Winterland in '73. There's a lot of cool songs, a lot of good versions of these songs that you never got to hear them do live, or a different take of some of these tunes. And so that's one thing I should recommend to people to get.
And what's the name of that one?
What's the name of that? It's called Dreams. It's the box.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones I got, and I was like, wow, what a great stuff, because I had all these different live material that I never had. Now
because of that box set, that's when they reunited and then became a force in the 90s.
I was just gonna say that, and then they have first I got this. I had the cassette, as you can imagine. Then I got the double disc. But I learned that from this stuff, they also remastered a lot of their catalog afterward to give you some of these extra bonus songs. So some of these songs will be repeated in other remastered discs, but there are some stuff that are worth to get.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, because I think like for some of the ones that I'll show here, the set lists don't vary all that much. But as Rick said at the top of the show, this is a band, especially at this time, and even in later years, they never played a song the same way twice, 2 nights in a row. They just didn't. And that's what was so great about bands from this era. Hendrix is another one. We'll talk about too when we talk about Hendrix, is you could have 10 live albums from the same tour. And each one of them is so unique because he was not playing these songs. They weren't arranged the same way every single night. They just didn't do that. Whereas you have a lot of bands today, they play the same set list, tour after tour, show after show. They don't really mix it up. That was not the case with some of these bands back then. So
a lot had to do with, because they didn't have to queue up with the video screen behind them. Like when Rush did it, they had all that technical stuff from lasers and stuff like that. They couldn't veer off the path because everything was programmed. With this, they didn't have no light show. The show was watching them perform right in front of right before your eyes, something you're not going to get anywhere else at that moment. And so it's so organic that it was that, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's the rock and roll audience that feed them. They feed back. They stretch the song according to the vibe of the room, the read in the room, most often.
Yeah. So the earliest recording I have of the Allman Brothers Band is from February 1970 at the Fillmore East. This is the Bears Sonic Journals, Fillmore East 1970. And interestingly enough, and this was released in 2018, the local post office here in town, there used to be a guy, an older gentleman, who worked at the post office. He's since retired, but I used to go in there all the time and talk to him. And he was a guy, when he was a kid, he went to like every show at the Fillmore East in New York City. So he would, every time I went in to go mail packages or whatever at the post office, he would tell me a different story about one of these classic bands that he saw at the Fillmore. And he actually was in the audience for both of these shows at the Fillmore East. He was telling me that you ever hear the famous story, Rick, about when the Jeff Beck group played at the Fillmore and Rod Stewart spent the whole
behind the amplifier
with his back to the audience?
Yeah.
This guy was in the front row watching that. He was like, it was so weird. Rod wouldn't turn around the whole night. He was like shy or something. What's going on? I was sitting right there on the edge of the stage and I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, oh, you are so lucky. It's like you can't even, as a music fan and a music
Yeah.
historian, I'm talking to this guy and I'm like, you can't imagine how lucky you were to experience all that as a young kid. It's like I was a little too young, but it's so anyway. I digress. But
Dude, that's
so
a
this
great
basically,
one.
and he would tell me these stories every time I went into the post office. Like, well, and it's just like, just blowing
So
my
what's
mind.
your favorite off that album? I got that one too. I got it because you reviewed it.
I mean, it's really great. This is, but it's, again, we talked about how all these live albums are very different, even though the same songs are on here. I mean, the arrangements are slightly different. I think "In Memory of Elizabeth Reed" is really different here.
Yeah, it is.
It is, and it's weird how it opens up the show, and then you got Mountain Jam is like a half hour long. What's really cool here is you have "Outskirts of Town," which is a cover song that's not on any other live album.
That's true.
To my knowledge, and I think "Hoochie Coochie Man" is great on here. So this is really cool. Pretty good recording. That's the earliest one I have, and I think the only other one I have from 1970. No, I got one more. Is, and you probably have this one too, Ludlow Garage.
No, I actually don't have that one.
This is
I gotta write it down.
Yeah, this is one of the first ones I ever got, Rick. I've had this for ages. I think this came out in 1990, and I bought this fairly early on when I started collecting CDs. And this was, I'm trying to think of exactly when this is from. Hold on. This is from April 11th, 1970. So this is like 2 months after the Fillmore one that I just showed. And what's notable about this one is you've got a 44-minute version of Mountain Jam, which is a whole disc in itself. And it kicks off with Dreams. You got Statesboro Blues, Trouble No More, Dimples, which is a cool little jam. Every Hungry Woman is on here. That doesn't make an appearance on many live albums at all.
No. That's a reason.
And then you got their version of "I'm Gonna Move You to the Outskirts of Town," and then "Hoochie Coochie Man." So this is great because it doesn't have a lot of the songs that are repeated on every other live album. So I would say if you can get this, get it. It's really, really good.
I think I remember looking at this. You know how when you have all these in your shopping cart and you have to prioritize. But I think there's a few songs in this box set is reason why that wasn't the first one I'm gonna grab. Because I remember I seen this just still in my shopping cart. So
I would recommend it. It's really good.
All right, thank you.
The last one from 1970 that I have is from July 15th, whatever it is, 1970, the Atlanta International Pop Festival.
Oh yeah, I got that one too.
So they played with a ton of other bands on this.
Jimi Hendrix was on that bill, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yep. In fact, they released that as well.
There is a live album. I got that too.
So what's interesting enough, if you read up on the history of this festival, is that they had really bad weather at this festival, and they had like a couple of band cancellations. So the Allmans played on July 3rd, and then they needed another band for the third day of the festival, so they came back and played on the 5th as well, which is just crazy. And they did roughly the same stuff. I mean, it's got a really short Mountain Jam. It's 16 minutes. I guess that's short for Mountain Jam.
That's for them, that is.
No real big surprises on here. Whipping Post is 14 minutes, but they do. So Mountain Jam on the first show is like 16 and change, 17 minutes, and then it's 28 minutes on day 3. And then it's got a 13-minute version of a Memory of Elizabeth Reed, which is pretty cool. But this is also really, really good, and the recording quality is excellent. So,
and it's a complete.
That's all I have from 70. You got any more from 70? You want to move right?
That's it. That's what I had about that, and that's good one to show. It is the complete show, right? For that whole set, they used, or did they use some of it from the third day? I'm
pretty sure that it's got the complete.
Of the first night.
And
that's what I thought.
Their set that they played on day 3 was truncated, right? They didn't play a full thing because I think it was very impromptu. It's like, can you guys go play? And they're like, all right, we'll play. So
it'd be interesting to see what order they play, because Jimi Hendrix had done that festival, and I think Zeppelin was too. But there's quite a bit of talent 10 years after, so forth.
Oh yeah, it was a stacked lineup.
Wow.
You have any more from 71?
No, but I do want to mention one of my first things I did when I was a kid, because I had this record. Like I told you before, it wasn't that common where everybody had all these rock movies, and I used to have to go to the library and one of my first time I wanted to see what the Allman Brothers looked like, besides seeing who. I didn't know who was who, like which one played what. and right until you open it up, and then you saw the instrument. Okay, I can figure it out. I think that's the keyboard player, and so what was cool was to get the VCR tape, and I still have it because I kept it and I paid the overdue charge and kept it, so I had to pay for it. I did it on purpose because I couldn't see it. It was called Live in 1982 in Florida, and what a great performance! And it was like a daytime show, and that was my gateway of saying, "Yeah, I got to get more of this band live," and so or just started collecting their album. And so I went down that rabbit hole because watching them perform, and of course Dwayne isn't here, but Dicky was just amazing. He blew me away, and he had a little more of a dominant role in the 80s here, where he sang just as much as Greg Allman at this point, and also brought more of the country southern rock into the band at this point. So it was cool to watch that milestone. So ultimately, I looked for that live recording. I got that, and then I ultimately got that digitally. But yeah, I started off with the VHS tape. That's how old I was. And this record was the only thing I had for the longest time till I joined Columbia Records and started going brothers and sisters.
Columbia House, you can start, amassing all sorts of stuff, right? It's crazy.
Right.
All right, let me just show off quickly some of these other early 70s ones. So this is from October 1971 from Painter Hill Music Fair in Owings Mills, Maryland. This is called The Final Note. This, I think, out of all the ones I have, Rick, this is probably the one with the least. It sounds okay, but it's definitely sound-wise the worst one that I have here. And again, and some of the tracks are incomplete. This was, I think, just they found these tapes and they figured they wanted to release them, even though it's not great sounding. Pretty good, though. It's definitely good. Definitely worth, if you're a big fan, definitely good.
And it's for the history, right?
Yeah. And then this is from the Austin Municipal Auditorium, September 28, 1971 in Austin, Texas, called Down in Texas. This is quite good. This is really good. This came out in 2021. They've just been, popping these things out. And again, here you're getting not a lot of deviation in the set list. This is a great one. I bought this one a while back. This is live from State University of New York at Stony Brook in Long Island from September 19th, 1971. And this is a 2-disc set. Disc 2, you got a 20-minute long Dreams and a 20-minute long In Memory of Elizabeth Reed. Really good. And then everything else on disc 1, you get Stormy Monday, You Don't Love Me, Statesboro Blues, Trouble No More, so on and so forth. This is quite good. And the last one I have, so this is the Fillmore West 1971. This was the beginning. I should have showed this first. This is the beginning of the year. So January 29th, 30th, and 31st, a three-night run at the Fillmore West. And this is really good. I would say for folks who want to kind of want a companion disc to the Live at the Fillmore East, you need this one because this is just as impressive here. Again, a lot of the same tracks from night to night tonight. It's mostly the same set list, barring a couple tunes here or there. But you get 3 full nights and all in one set. Really, really good.
That's
really
awesome.
Good. Yeah, and great sound quality on that too as well.
What year did that come out, pal?
This came out in 2019. So again, it's all more recent years. Yeah, they're finding all this stuff. Yeah, Rick, I would say if all the stuff that I just showed, like what probably is the best place for you to go to first to get, definitely the Fillmore one, definitely the Stony Brook show, and definitely the Ludlow Garage.
We got it. I already wrote them, and I even wrote Texas 71. I'm gonna complete that, man.
Yeah, most of these you have. Yeah, that's exactly right. You have to have them, right? And like we said at the beginning, there's a lot more out there that Rick and I don't even have. It's you look at the stack and I got so many Allman Brothers Lives album, but there's a ton more. So
yeah,
all right, so do you have anything from the 80s?
Other than what I just talked about? Then there's I have mostly like from DVD stuff that's coming up next, mainly the 90s on. I covered in the year 2000 stuff. So, like I said, I didn't get a lot of the vault because I always felt like, how you top something like this? But as I started getting Atlantic Pop Festival and started to go, wow, they get great. And you continue. My search in the Allman Brothers was try to get the different lineup recording for a while. I mean, not could Dwayne is the ultimate lineup. Don't get me wrong, but when they got Warren Hayes joined in the band, it just brought a lot more oof, and I don't know, he just brought some fresh life into the band, in my opinion. And I love seeing them working together. Have you seen the Allman Brothers, my friend?
A lot.
Yeah. Okay. Same here. And I enjoyed that so much that I try to get a little period of that time period. Like, remember when this album came out, The Shades of Two Worlds, right? Very important live album. To me, it not only gave them, but that one song, End of the Line, was played a lot, and I really loved it. So I had to go out and get those live recordings of that, and I did. And there's so many of them. So I just bought a couple from my house. But live at the Great Wood, it was 1991, September 6th. Great concert. And there's also a soundtrack to that. Like, you can get a CD of the, but it got, what's great about, they do play some of the stuff of the past, but you also get some songs I didn't have in here, like Midnight Rider, Blue Sky. But I really bought it for End of the Line. I wanted that version, seeing them do that, and that's a great tune, right? And then, of course, I don't want to get into the year 2000 yet.
That's big, Rick. That album there is basically that lineup's Fillmore album.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It is. And that's why it's worth mentioning, because it's like the only difference is that they're not going to, double album today, but with a single length CD, they can get them all on one disc. But this is like, what I like about this too is that they get the complete show, no editing. It's not 2 nights. This is 1 night, the entire show, and it's flawless. I think it's great. And then, of course, we'll get into the year 2000. But when you get into like the Deacon Theater, they do a couple versions of different, come back. There's some places like Winterland and a few other places where they're like, or the Fillmore, they're like coming there religiously every year. People look forward, and they record a lot of these albums. So you can go on to, just like I told people before about the Black Crowes, there are online concerts where Government Mule and Allman Brothers say, hey, this is the show of that night. You can get and download the concert that they played at that particular night. So they do a lot of that. So you don't have to just go and get the copyrighted stuff. They're on their website, and some of the things that they do, they give you access to see the show that you want to see. Or that you were there. If you were at that concert, I want a soundtrack of my life, you can get it. And I did that with the Black Hole, the Allman Brothers, Government Mule. So there's a lot that I can't show you because they're digitally from the website, but there's a lot in that period from in this whole area where you can get so many different nights. And they will throw occasional different cover that they never release just to keep you up. Because that's one thing Warren liked to do, is to put homage to a lot of great of the past. As it is, the Allman Brothers did that. They gave a lot of recognition to the blues scholars of the past. But honestly, it's really original music, just using their lyrics. Like One Way Out, for example, the Sonny Boy Williamson song. Okay, the original, Sonny Boy Williamson 2. His real name is Rice Miller. But he wrote some songs, but the Allman Brothers did exactly like what Cream did. They take the lyric from Crossroads, but they wrote their own music and gave him credit to it. And the guy made more money on an Allman Brothers song than he did in his whole life. And really, the music is theirs. It's like Crossroads. You listen to Robert Johnson and then listen to Cream Crossroads. That's not the same song, but lyrically it is. But that's it. You know what I mean? So that was kind for them to even give these guys songwriting credit and not even give themselves credit. But they made, money from the album they sold. But really, a lot of that is their own music. Like they, I get it where they've been inspired. But if you listen to it on a face value, if you didn't hear the words, that could have been any different. If they threw any different lyric, that could have been a totally original song for them. So that's one of the things I noticed, that they always respected whatever they got a little inspired. They never ripped off anybody. They give credit where it's due. And sometimes they give credit where I didn't think they had to, in my opinion, because they're really original band.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think that we talked before about how the Dreams compilation box set came out, and that prompted that was very well received, and they played a couple like reunion shows, and it inspired them to continue on. They did Seven Turns, they did all those four albums in the '90s, and then in true Allman Brothers fashion, they were out on the road constantly, and we got some really good live albums in the '90s. And I mean, there's here sold the Night at the Beacon, 1992. This is killer, 2-disc set, got everything on it. But what, as Rick mentioned, it's got this great mix of old classics and the newer stuff, which soon to be classics. Great album. I think for me, the first one that I bought, because the Beacon one came out a little bit later, was An Evening with the Allman Brothers.
Yeah, I got that too.
Also, this is Take the Deep.
You got the second.
You got to have both of them, right? You got to have both of them.
And what's great about this, because you get End of the Line on a CD, plus Get On With Your Life. I love that song. Never a live recording of that. Melissa's awesome in it. Nobody Knows. These are great songs just to get that. But it's so short, comparing what we had with the double album. Even though it's a long single CD, it goes by quick. That's why you're glad to get the second set. And my favorite tune on here, honestly, is Soul Shine. I love
Soul Shine is great. Yeah.
Isn't that a great version? And again, there's reason to buy this album, people out there, that there's always a song or two that's not going to be featured necessary in other versions. Or, there's always a couple that, because they always like promoting the last album or something. So you're always going to get one of the new songs that they were showcasing that tour. Right.
And there's no overlap on these.
Nope.
So basically you put these together and you have a sensational live album, right? So you've got End of the Line, Blue Sky, Get On With Your Life, Southbound, Midnight Rider, Melissa. Nobody knows the definitive version is on this album. I mean, it's just
awesome.
absolutely sensational. Dreams and Revival. And then on this one, you got Sailing Across the Devil's Sea, You Don't Love Me, Soul Shine, Back Where It All Begins, which is terrific. In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, terrific. The Same Thing, No One to Run With, and then a great Jessica. So literally, I've told the story on the channel before, but back very briefly, I was laid off from a job, and then I was kind of looking for work in 1992. And I wound up working for this kind of music and electronics store called Nobody Beats the Wiz. It's not around anymore. And I took it because I thought it would be cool. It's like I'd never worked retail before, but I was like, let me give it a try. Work in a music store. How bad could it be? It sucked, ladies and gentlemen. But the cool thing about it is that I got to hear like a lot of the new music that was coming out in the year. And when I was working there, this album had just come out. And I remember we were playing it in the store one day. And one of the guys I work with, he was a bit older than me. He was a big jazz fan. And one day we were playing it, and I made a comment to him like, "Oh, this is great. I love the Allman Brothers band." He looks at me. He goes, "Really?" He goes, "This is like the live album of Doom, man. They don't stop playing guitar solos on this." And I was like, "That's why it's so good." And he looked at me like I was off my rocker. I'm like, "No, man, come on, you're missing the point." But and the recordings are terrific. These are
fantastic. Like I said, every time, like if it's an Allman Brothers official release, it's bona fide great.
Yeah.
Same thing
and
with
you can't understate how well Warren Haynes and Dicky Betts work together. I mean, as much as I love Dwayne and Dicky from the old days, man, Warren and Dicky is a force to be reckoned with. I mean,
I agree. I totally agree. They're actually dynamic duo between those two. And the tones are separate, so you can hear them a little separation there a little bit. But the fact is, they're so in sync. You don't know who's doing the duo. Is he doing the high one? Although dual leads is so flawless and the phrasing so wonderful. They kept that tradition that Dwayne and Dicky did establish. No question, Dwayne had, sparked that torch, but Dicky had that blazing the whole time. And then when he passed it to Warren, and of course we know Dicky did leave for a period of time. I'm glad I got to see them together. I saw them at Woodstock '94. When we went all the way out there, it was a great. I'll talk about that a 3-day event many times. It wasn't the disaster one that happened after 1999, but this one was pretty good. Just it was corporate sponsored by Pepsi, but we had wonderful talent there, and the Allman Brothers were just on fine form. They played in the midday Saturday, maybe around a 4-5 o'clock mark, and but they were fantastic, and you know, with all the big people that were there, from you got Metallica, Red Hot Chili Pepper, Aerosmith, Collective Soul, Live, all these different artists, Peter Gabriel, all these different. Allman Brothers was just as important as all these different big names at that time that were there. They were just important draw because they were so unique. Crosby, Stills, and Nash had to follow them, and I think they had the crowd going a lot, participating, clapping all the way through. It was really cool because you know what? The Allman Brothers, especially for this Canadian, is a little bit of a culture. You do get that Southern rock, just like, some people say, you got to live where the blues come from to be a real true blues magician. Well, to be a Southerner rocker, you got to come from that part of that geography, and they are true blues Southern rockers, and they were respected by that way. They came on there their own personnel sandwiched in between all these different type of acts, but they were their own thing, and nobody sounded like them, and they had their own show, and people equally loved them like everybody else. They were well received, and so I was glad to see that lineup. But I also saw them after Dicky left, and around this time where I saw the 2023. No, 2003, sorry. And this is the Beacon Theater again, but it's a different set list than what you got here. And a lot of great stuff. Wasting Time No More, Black Hearted Woman, all kinds of cool tunes that wasn't on those other albums. So this is worth the get. And it's just a double CD, so they give you rehearsals, interviews, and that. This is one of my favorite of all the DVDs because you get so much. The only thing that's a shame that Dicky's on this one. He's not here. But it was still a great.
You got Derek Trucks, right? And the young Derek Trucks.
That's right. And I'm going to say, then here's a whole new future, right? Yeah. And a whole new band that kept the traditional Allman Brother vibe. They didn't lose it. They just enhanced it and made it relevant to the present day. So the 21st century Allman Brothers at this period is just as important as the 90s and just as important as the 70s. The only, you may argue the new material coming out, maybe not everybody knows what's coming up, new song, but the fact that the live experience is still the same. It's still going to be, mind-blowing, showing you great musicianship, give you a full diet of Allman Brothers. You're walking away with your belly full. You're not walking away thinking, oh, man, I wish they did this. Could they play their heart out when they play?
How interesting is it, Rick, that when you look at it? So when Warren joined the band, he basically was tasked with taking Dwayne's roles and lines and solos and slide guitar parts from the early stuff and playing that in the band, right? Mm-hmm. So when Dicky left, they brought in Derek, who's one of the greatest slide players of all time. And all of a sudden now Warren shifted from playing Dwayne's stuff to Dicky's stuff and his own, obviously. And Derek became the Dwayne Allman part of the band for the old stuff. Weird how, but that's a testament to Warren Haynes, I think, because I think Warren Haynes can play anything in any style, and he's so adaptable. And I think, to me, you look at the long career of the Allman Brothers, and you have to say Greg is probably, the guy who was there from start to finish, right? He's the guy. But to me, the MVP of this band, especially since like 1989 or so until the very end, was Warren Haynes, I think, even though, he left for a few years, to just do the government mule thing. But I think that whenever he was in the band, he's like the heart and soul of the Allmans from his time in the band, I think.
I agree totally, 100%. I honestly, he was like the cheerleader, the music director. He was all those things that kept that torch going, and I'm sure he had a lot and posters designs and and set lists and doing all the stuff, making Greg's life a little easier.
Yeah.
I mean, just play, do your thing, Greg. I'll take care of some of that legit. He just could, because he has a lot of drive. He's very talented. He knew everybody's part. So it's not surprising to me. I think you said it great to talk about that. The guy could do Dwayne, his part, Dicky's part. He knew it all. So he probably made it easier. What part you want to do? Because I know it all, right? So he'll just do what the song needs. And what I also like is that for two great guitar players, I never felt like there was a competition.
Never.
There was always a complimentary. There's always a solidarity among those two. It was never like I want to outsmoke you or the other. Like there is a little bit. Iron Maiden don't do that either. But in the beginning, they might have. You know, there are bands that are two guitar players. They try to step up their game when Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck would play. And I think that became one of the reasons maybe Jeff Beck left. It was not something that it was. You never knew you had to step up your game, and there's a lot of pressure there. But they didn't do that to each other. They were respectful. They knew they had two great guitar players in the band. They made the whole band shine. That's one of the things I take away from this. There's definitely a unison, a solidarity act among the two guitar players, or not when they're jamming the way they are. It's all musical. It's not about competition. It's not to show you who's the better player here. It's enhancing each other, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think regardless,
it always happen.
Yeah, no, it doesn't always happen. Yeah, I never got that impression either. It's like I always felt that no matter who the two guitar players were in this band, they always really worked well together, and nobody was trying to show off and be the guy, right? Because they both knew they had a role to play, and that role had to intermingle equally, right? So even early on, Dwayne got all the press early on, but I mean, and I think that Dicky to me seemed the more reserved of the two guys, and kind of just said, all right, Dwayne's the star of the show and that's fine. But then it took Dwayne, passing away for that star in Dicky to kind of come out. But it was never about a competition thing. That's very, very true and very, very important. And I think that no matter who the two players were, they both did some amazing stuff here, regardless of the combination. And there's so, I think that post 2000 is when we got so many Allman live albums. I mean, I hardly have any when you really think about it in the grand scheme of things. I mean, I've got this Cream of the Crop from 2003.
That's a good one to have. I got that.
Yeah, 4-disc set. The one official release at the time is the One Way Out set. And this, if you want like an amazing Derek and Warren set, this double disc set is just absolutely amazing, because not only do they cover a lot of the classics, they cover a lot of the mandatory stuff from the 90s and the 2000s. Just really, really good. There's the Fox box, from which is 3 different shows in September from the Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. 2004. This is amazing. And again, it's you get all. They've just released some great archival stuff on Peach Records. And then I think the last one that I have is from 2005 from the Warner Theater in Erie, Pennsylvania. Another double disc set.
I got that one too.
And this one's really cool because there's all sorts of stuff on here, and there's some old classics, then there's some cool covers, and
there's a good reason to get this one too, because it's got some standout tracks that you don't get another
nowhere else.
Nowhere else. So that's why I like that a lot. I do that a lot. Sometimes when I see it, when we were, ultimately I got every Deep Purple, but there was a time they did the same set list a lot. So I always try to find the one album that had the different thing, and ultimately get that all together. But that was why I grabbed that one, because there's a lot of song titles I didn't recognize right off the top.
Yeah, right. Like they do Good Morning Little Schoolgirl on here. 12 which is great. You got Firing Line. They do, and you don't see it on a lot of live albums, The High Cost of Low Living, which is a great track by them. You got, what else is on here? The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down.
Yeah, right? That's from the band, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they did a lot of interesting covers, but they were always Southern rock or Southern covers, like something to that fit in their discography, like if it's in the wheelhouse, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It belongs there. Like Good Morning Schoolgirl, that's a Sonny Boy Williamson song covered by a lot of the bands of the so-called British invasion back in the
like
60s.
10 years after and whatnot.
Yeah. A lot of people.
Yeah, this is a really, really good one from one of the the later years, and I would assume that we'll probably continue to get more because since we've seen lots of live albums been released since Greg passed away. Right now, obviously the band are no more, but I would think that stuff from the vaults from the Allmans are going to continue to come out because they sell. That's the thing. They know that if they release them, people will buy them. Like me.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's a lot of live soundboard recording that they legally let people download, so they didn't have to make physical copies of them. And I have a lot of that because you can see the set list and you knew you were getting different tunes. And you can actually just download the song that you wanted if you didn't want the entire show. So
and make your own live album, right?
And make your own live album, or make a compilation of that tour because they have it by the year. So there's a lot, and I have a lot of those things, just like I do with the Black Crows. But the Black Crows give you the I know the Government Mule did too, but they give you the opportunity to either buy the download or buy the physical copy and then mail it to you. And I did, but it's nothing just in a cardboard jacket. It's nothing fancy, but it has all the tunes. But the fact that you and me love physical product, I had to do it. But the Allman didn't do that with every one of those live stuff, but I got it and I put it on my laptop. And what I like about it is that I can play one of those live concert where like I'm on a long different drive and just kind of vision what is going on. And then again, I know it's going to be different in the next live concert I grab. The tune's going to have a different length and it's almost a different experience. So that's one thing about the Allman Brothers is that if you got a series of live albums, you're not hearing that same thing over and over. You can just play a different night, different tour. Even though you hear that song, but you're not hearing that same version. That how people get burned out. We talk about it all the time. Classic rock albums do burn people out. But when you have a multiple live sets and know that you got some of these hits are on there, but a different experience, you don't get bored of that stuff. That's why you keep buying these live albums. Jimi Hendrix, when we went to that, we're going to show you and demonstrate that every night has a special night. Every band is different. The band of Gypsies and the experiences, or the bass player from Noah to Billy, totally different, brings a whole new different dynamic to the band. But what we wanted to end with everybody know that the Allman Brothers did have that classic legendary live album for a reason, and it's a reason why they have the fans that they do. I'm sure of it, but they carry that tradition, and that's why they can have multiple live albums that are still equal in terms of power and showing what the Allman Brothers really about. It's just a different photograph, a different time period, a capture, time capture, or a moment they captured in time in our lives, right? But they're just as important to have stuff from the 90s and stuff from the year 2000, people, because I'm telling you, the Allman Brothers experience is consistent when it says that there's greatness in every one of these shows for what they do, what they're famous about, and what they're known to do. They never light up. Because you follow some bands in the 70s, the sound changed in the 80s, like, for example, Rush, or in the 90s. They don't change. They just enhance with modern technology. They just made us more from the back of the room could hear just as good as the person in the front row. But that sound they always had from what you known about the band is consistently right to the very end. Right, pal?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So before we leave, real quick, do you recall how many times you got to see the Allman Brothers band live, and any that stand out?
I saw them, I would say 2 times with Dicky and 4 times without. So 6 in total.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there was always sometimes, and they were always headlining or sharing the bill with somebody else, just as equal, and they would flip a coin doing. But a lot of it, I even once saw them with Government Mule playing in the same night for it was a special thing in Detroit. But all my shows I saw them was in Detroit or in New York State at Woodstock. I was the first time, and I've seen many times since then. But honestly, when you watch all the DVDs that I got, I feel like I saw more concerts than that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't. I'd have to go tally it up. I would assume I've probably seen the Allmans at least a dozen times. The first time I saw them was on the Seven Turns tour, which was early '90s. I was working in New York City at the time. I saw them in Madison Square Garden. They had Meatloaf opening up. That was very, very cool because it was my first time. But I've seen them at numerous outdoor gigs because they play at Bethel Woods, which is the old Woodstock site.
Yeah, the
I've seen them
Woodstock.
there quite a few times. I've seen them at an open air speedway in Middletown, New York, and that had the Jeff Healey band opening up. And that was also with Dicky. I've probably seen them 4 or 5 times with Dicky and Warren, and then I've seen maybe more actually when you think about it. Because I used to go, they do those long runs at the Beacon Theater, and for a number of years I would try to catch them, if not once on every run every year. I would go every other year, so I caught them quite a few times at the Beacon. And then I saw them a number of times with Warren and Derek at the Beacon, at Bethel Woods as well, and maybe at Jones Beach in Long Island as well. So, but other than Beacon shows and the Garden Show, I've seen them outdoors a lot, which is kind of,
me too.
It's where you want to catch these guys, right? I mean,
Yeah, that is the vibe. They almost have not quite the Deadhead thing, but they have the hippie movement, people that come out and all those outdoor shows that are dressing just like they were coming from flashback of Woodstock. They're wearing tie-dye shirts and jacket tassel, or the people that wearing the Confederation symbols or whatever that represent the thing at that time. Depending on when we saw them, right? Because obviously that became a political issue later. But ultimately, though, I always remember them as like the summer vibe band. That band. I mean, they're not like the Beach Boys that only wrote about the beach, but there's something about their music that gave you that warm sunshine, barbecuing atmosphere, right? The July 4th or July 1st for our Canada Day. I always think of the Allman Brothers like that. And I saw them share the bill once with Stevie Miller, I think, band, and not really work together. But I did see him with, I think that was my second time, was seeing him with Jeff Healey open up. He's a Canadian. I've talked to him quite a few times. And, a sensational guitar player, being blind and playing the way he did. But that music really worked that night, like having two separate bands, but they have their own style blues, right? And putting them on the same bill was a great show.
Yeah, I agree with you about the whole summertime thing, and the Allman Brothers here in New York anyway, is you would always see them come around and play either some kind of jam festival or do a selection of shows in the summertime outdoors. But then you always knew, well, they're going to book a March or April string of concerts at the Beacon Theater, right? Because that's what they did. So you knew you can go see them indoors in the wintertime in New York City. But what was crazy is I remember when they announced the last tour, and I was like, all right, I've seen them a ton of times, but I would love to see them again. They played 3 weeks straight at the Beacon. I couldn't get a ticket for any of those shows, literally. And that's a whole other topic of conversation about Ticketmaster. But they would announce another show, they would go on sale, and within 10 seconds, sold out. Night after night after night after night after night for the 3-week run. I couldn't get a ticket to any of them. And then you wait, and then you can go buy someone who's reselling them, but then you're paying 5 times the ticket price. And I'm just so I wound up getting shut out of their final tour and their final string of shows at the Beacon, and I was really upset about that because I really wanted to go, because I was for the last handful of times I saw the Allmans, I just bought a ticket for myself and I just went. I just hopped on a train, went to New York City. Went to see the show by myself because that's how much I love the band, right?
Yeah. So
I made the mistake of bringing my wife to 2 shows, and my wife hates the Allman Brothers. She likes Melissa and Ramblin' Man and maybe Blue Sky, but man, for the most part, my wife in a live Allman Brothers show does not work at all.
It's funny you say that.
Songs and stuff. Yeah.
I was in Port Elgin, Ontario. I'm driving home, and I would put it on. I would listen to the Allman Brothers, and I think it was just the Elizabeth Reed song, and she says, "When they're gonna start singing in this? Is it going on?" Nope. I said, "They don't need to. It's perfectly. The guitar's singing. Don't you hear the melody?" She didn't understand instrumental. They don't get the long jamming. why
No.
that is. We're into it, but that's kind of funny when you talk about, because I just went through that with the Allman Brothers with Paula on the way home.
Yeah, it's funny. I took my now wife, we were just dating at the time. I took her to see a Allman Brothers show in Jones Beach, Long Island, with outdoor thing back in like the late '90s. We'd just been together a short period of time, and she really didn't enjoy it because my wife is just not into instrumental music. She's not into long guitar solos and all that kind of stuff. So she really didn't enjoy it, and I was disappointed. But I was like, all right, I get it. And then like many years later, I bought us tickets to go see them up at Bethel Woods. And I think she really didn't want to go, but she went just to kind of make me happy, right? And it rained during the show. And even though we were under the roof of the pavilion, the rain was coming sideways. And then someone spilled beer on her. And like halfway through the show, I could tell she was miserable. And I wound up taking her home, and I missed like half of the show. And I was like, why did I do this to myself?
Yeah, why do you did it?
And I said that I will never, ever, I said, hon, I promise I will never, ever take you to an Allman Brothers show again. And I did, but yeah. Oh well, you can't force your significant other to like what we like, right? It's just
no, I hear you. I mean, I remember going to see Jeff Beck and Buddy Guy, and my Paula loved Buddy Guy because he sings and he plays solos and all that. But Jeff Beck started off all these instrumental. Don't tell me we got to listen to a whole 45 minutes instrumental. They did have somebody sing Going Down and a few others, but she was like, oh, I just saw in her face, honey, don't worry. Buddy Guy sings every song. But anyway, so that was, but I was going to say Beacon Theater, how many people can fit in that? So many legendary shows from that.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, Rick, but it's less than 4. I think it's like 3,800 or something like that. It's big, but not that big. So it's
big enough to everybody else almost has the same experience because it's not that
pretty much. Yeah.
So it's a little bit intimate there, but yeah, so it's a good sized theater. So I was wondering, because I've never been, and I've got to try to visit there.
Yeah, it's great. You owe it to yourself to go to at least one Beacon Theater show in your life. I've seen many shows there, and it's probably my favorite. You know, I hate to say that Madison Square Garden isn't my favorite venue in New York City, but it's not. The Beacon Theater is my favorite venue in New York City. Cool. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous theater. There's no bad seat in the house, and the sound is always great. And it's easy to get to, and it's Yeah, I've seen the Allman Brothers there many, many times. Always a pleasure. I've seen Joe Bonamassa there. I've seen Dream Theater there. I've seen so many bands there. And I when I see a band is playing at the Beacon Theater that I really like, I go. It's just It's a great place. Yeah. So there you have it, everybody. Some live album love for the Allman Brothers Band. We'll be back next month with another show. I think we're either doing Deep Purple or Hendrix next. Either way, we'll decide between now and then. So we'll be covering both of them in the upcoming weeks, and lots of other bands. We'll be doing the Stones. We'll be doing the Black Crowes. We'll, throw in Maiden and Priest and Humble Pie and Zeppelin. Yeah, yes, and you name it. Yeah, there's so many bands that have a lot of live albums, and that's what we're going to try and cover. So again, Rick, any updates for you on? You're working on that album, right?
Yeah, well, Derek just Trevinian just produced one of my last tunes I gave to him. He just suggested the arrangement, and I'm like, right on. I'm not going to say no to this guy, but he played in a couple other tracks that come along well, and I'm doing a video, and so we got some dates coming up. One in New York, and we got a few dates in Detroit. I got a few things that are coming up that I'm working behind the scenes. I'm always playing in Southern Ontario, but it's kind of nice to get going across to Michigan and maybe New York State and a few other places with these songs. I'm constantly playing all these. I got a couple festivals coming up locally, and with the blues side or with my band of brothers. But yeah, life is good, actually, my friend. A lot of things going on, seen a lot of concerts. Got to, like I said, it's been a great year meeting, people from, Articon, Bumblefoot and Chef Scott Soto this year. It's all kinds of people I'm networking with. And then, so it's been a great year. So who knows? You know, you just don't know. And a lot of people that I met from this channel been networking with me and promoting my music. I just want to say thank you to everybody out there. It's been doing some wonderful stuff. Today's the day we get the Black Country Communion album that's released, and I got the shirt from Joe Bonamassa's site. And that one came in. So I'm looking forward to listening to that when I get home. It should be in my mailbox. But no, tonight, the BTO concert. I mean, I got a lot of shows. So if I'm not performing, I got a lot of concerts I'm checking out. So it's going to be a great year. You know, it's so important. That's why we wanted to talk about live albums, folks, because live music is so important. It's good for the soul. And I'm so thankful that COVID is over and we're getting back to swing things. Windsor is booming in tourism now again. Live concerts are up and running again like they used to be. And we're in a real good place today, and I'm happy for that. Knock on wood, it continues. Live music.
Absolutely. It's where it's at. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Tune in next month for another episode of Live Album Love. And in the meantime, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together. All the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell to get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. All sorts of relevant links are down below in the video description. And we'll see you next time. Stay tuned. A couple hours, Ken Golden with Professor's Picks coming up. We got the UK Connection tomorrow. Simon, Stephen, and myself will be ranking the songs on a classic album. That album is Aerosmith Rocks. And then Sunday, Grant Arthur and I will be ranking the albums of Nantucket. So speaking of Southern bands, there's another one. So Rick Labonte, IMP Pardo, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Take care.